Welcome to the Soulful Badass podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Jackson, an intuitive success coach from the UK, and I'm here to help entrepreneurs, leaders, and soul-aligned goddesses to create epic levels of success and impact in your life and your business. So if that sounds good to you, make sure you are tuning in every week for mindset talk, manifestation, magic, and incredible interviews with other soul-aligned entrepreneurs. So hit the subscribe button, and I'd love to invite you to come and join the Soulful Badass community. All the links are in the show notes. Please go and click them, and I'll see you in there. Hi everyone, welcome to this week's podcast episode. This week I have the amazing Heather Doran with me. Heather is a money coach and she has just written her first solo book, Finally Worthy, and also managed to speak on a TEDx stage in Lake Charles, which is absolutely amazing. So Heather, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, yes, thank you so much for having me back. It's been a while. It's been almost 4 years, right?
Wow. Yeah. I think from our first episode, you were on my first ever season of the podcast when it was your time now. Yeah.
It's like, it seems like a long time, but then it almost doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, so many things have just rapidly changed since then. Because I think that was the beginning a little bit before all this stuff happened with COVID, right?
I think we were in the middle of it probably. So it was 2020 when I started the podcast. So that's when we got to meet, and obviously not meet in person. We've never done that yet.
I know. I'll have to come your way one of these days.
Well, I'll definitely be coming over there. But yeah, we got to meet virtually and obviously work together a bit in the mastermind. You were one of the coaches and I got to meet you through that. And then the rest is history. And like now you're a published author. So
yeah,
I'm looking at the back of your book now, and you were obviously, your background's accountancy and you're deeply intuitive as well. And that's how we got to meet. But I love that you call yourself an accountant turned money detective, but not in the way you might think. So do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah, I mean when I started doing the work that I'm doing now, I was helping people with just kind of basic like bookkeeping functions, helping them really just like a lot of it was just to get the tax return done. And what I ended up discovering is that there was such a deeper level to why it was so hard and so difficult for people to just do the thing, like just to like sit down and like go through your finances or make a spreadsheet or do the like just all the things. It was like mind like just numbing. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, why is this so? Because, add and subtract, like it's not difficult to make a worksheet. It's not difficult to open a bank statement. Like it's not difficult to do these things. Like what gives? And so what I ended up really understanding is that it's so much more. The reason why we find such difficulty in managing our finances and having more things, having more money, it's because there's like a deep layer inside subconsciously playing out. So there's all these stories that are just subconsciously playing out every day, every day, every day. And that is the reason why we find such difficulty in doing the things that we do. And I specifically help people with the money side of things. So, when I talk about like kind of being that detective, it's really helping you pull that thread and be that detective for like, what gives? Like, why am I spinning out right now? Why is my heart beating so fast? I think I'm going to leave my chest, or like, why is this happening? And so it's helping you become this inner detective to understand why is this happening? What is going on? And then really start to plug away at those layers.
Yeah. And healing those subconscious money blocks that you talk about. And that's what it ultimately comes down to, isn't it? Those deep rooted beliefs that people have that then stop them opening that bank statement or whatever it is. But actually, it goes even further than that because it stops you bringing in the level of wealth that, you know, you are worthy of. And I love that that's what you explore through your own journey in the book.
Yeah. And it's been a really interesting journey to uncover it. And I think that's why I wrote it in the way I did. I really kind of do a chronological storytelling of my life, my journey, and kind of how I've come to this place of just this level of awareness. And it starts out with losing my mom when I was 2. And because she left, my parents divorced and she left and joined the military. And so that experience created a lot of beliefs in that little 2-year-old. And that little 2-year-old then created more beliefs and more beliefs and more beliefs. And they sat there and they festered through my whole life. And this happens to all of us. And so I take the reader on this chronological journey to understand where this happened for me and then help you and give you hopefully some awareness to go, oh my gosh, that happened to me, or something similar happened to me, or maybe not even similar. Maybe it just sparks a thing about like, oh my gosh, when I was 5 years old, my dad told me to sit down and shut up. And now I have this inner belief that I am not allowed to speak up, or whatever it is. Like it's so tiny. Like we don't realize that one incident created a spiral effect in these beliefs that then carried out that we're literally living out today. It's like how we are literally living our life today because our subconscious mind loves us so much that it wants to spare us this pain from feeling that when you were 5 years old or 2 years old or whatever it is. And so it's wired so beautifully to say, oh no, don't do this, don't take that path because that's potentially painful.
Yeah.
And so that's how I kind of wrote the book, that, for you to have that type of awareness.
Yeah. And when you run through the book, so I'll talk about the structure because I absolutely love it, but then I want to talk about me reading it. I love the way that you have set out what you've done. To anybody listening and thinking about getting the book, it is brilliant. The way that Heather's set it out is, like she says, she tells a story and then there's this really great reflection of what that actually has resulted in and meant. And then you go on to say what it's resulted in for your money. So what does that mean about money? So you've really kind of took people on this journey in every single chapter and also given them activities to be able to explore that for themselves. I don't think I've ever seen it laid out in that sense. Obviously, people do tell a story and then, have an activity, which sometimes fills me with dread, I'm not going to lie. But the way that you have done it it's just so perfect, and it really does work and gets you thinking along the way. Was that intentional, or where did that come from?
This in the whole book writing process, like none of it, I'll be honest, none of it was intentional. I started writing about my grandma. I met with the editor and she was like, yeah, like the story needs to be about you, not about everybody else. So we went through like, okay, what do you want to talk about? Like, what is the story you want to tell? And then as I was writing it, it just kind of happened. Like I reflected on it. I was like, okay, what's the reason that I'm telling you my mom left and this happened and that happened? Like, why am I telling you this? So it created this beautiful opportunity for me to say, okay, this is what is sparked in me. And then my whole purpose, I feel like I found my whole purpose. It's that I'm here to help you understand, okay, and this is what it has to do with your money. Because I found myself in coaching session after coaching session, we would start like I coach on people on money, right? But we get into discussions about like their schedule, or they just found out that somebody has cancer, or they're spiraling out about this other thing, and we end up going through this, and then I lead it back to like, okay, and so do you see now how like this thing is creating this, which is then affecting how you're showing up, which is affecting about how you're making money. So it just all came like, it just hit me one day. I'm like, this is what I do. It's just like it all like just comes down to, and this is what it has to do with your money, and this is why your
Yeah.
money. And so it just beautifully fit together like that.
Yeah, well, it couldn't be more perfect because it does just flow, but it allows people to kind of go on that journey with you. And for me, we've known each other for years, but I feel like I know so much more about you reading this book. And we were just chatting before you come on, and I'm a manifesting generator in human design. If anybody doesn't know what that means, multi-passionate, and as well, probably multi-attention span is, when it comes to reading books, there's plenty of books in my house. I'm constantly buying books, but getting to the end of a book is often a chore, or I will have about 5 books on the go at once, dipping in and out of them all. So for me, when Heather come on, I ordered the book and it actually come this weekend, and I was thinking, oh wow, I've not got that long to sit and read it and run through it. I could not put this down. I've read in such a short space of time nearly the full book, Heather. I could not at all just put it down.
So
it was gripping. And your stories, heart-wrenching, vulnerable, so honest. And it really hit me to the point where I was like, I need to see what happens next. I need to continue. And so I imagine that was a journey, even writing all of that down for yourself and getting that out and bearing your soul in that aspect. So please explain what that process
Yeah,
was for you.
it was so interesting because like because when I met with the editor, we met in a 4-hour, we met in Florida for a writing retreat, and my block, we each got a 4-hour block with the girl who was the coach and the editor of the book. And she basically just kind of coached me through, okay, and then what was the next thing? And then, okay, what is the next thing you want to talk about? So we kind of laid it out. And then when I sat down to say, okay, now I'm going to like tell the story, it was very activating, to say the least, to go back, because I don't think I've ever really like, you think about the like, okay, this thing happened, but to like really come back at it as the observer, because that's really how I went to it, is like I came back in as the observer, but I also came back in as that version of myself. So I really kind of put myself back into like, okay, I was that 6-year-old again. And like, what was she experiencing? What was she thinking? Like, how was she feeling? Like, how was she experiencing this? Because that's really what I wanted. And I remember like some of the language is almost really first grade, second grade language I know I used in some of the chapters, because I was really emanating that person that was experiencing that. And then to come out of it, and I was like, holy fuck,
Yeah.
like, whoa, wow. And then to really like witness myself and say, wow, you survived that. Like, wow. Wow. Yeah, it was definitely an activating experience. There was a lot of tears. There was a lot of like, I had to do a lot of self-coaching. I did a lot of coaching with my coach. I did a lot of crying on my husband's t-shirt.
Oh.
And some days I would just start crying and my husband's like, "Why are you crying?" And I'm like, "I don't know." But it was like it's like it was leaving my system.
Yeah.
And so it was it was a beautiful experience to just re-witness myself, but then also like understand once again why like things have played out the way that they have in my life, and then really come to this place of like, okay, this is where we're at. And like the story stops here. The story of like, you're not good enough, you don't deserve this, all the things, and going back and saying like, that's bullshit. Like that story stops now. And we were through the whole book. The book had been edited, and the editor was like, okay, we got to name it. And we, I mean, we're so many, I mean, like so many names came out, 50, 100 names. I don't even know. We brainstormed this thing to death. And then my husband and I sat down for lunch one day and he's like, okay, tell me what the book's about. So I like blurted out what the book's about. And he's like, okay, well, and then we kind of went back and forth about like finally worthy. And I'm like, finally worthy. Yeah. And then, you know, and it just like came, like one day it just came together and I'm like, yep, that's it. Because that's the journey that I took. And I hope for the reader is that you can see that you are finally worthy, that you've been through all of this has happened, and you are worthy of having all the things that you want.
Yeah. And I mean, you've been doing this work for a long time now, and like any money mindset work, you're constantly doing it because when you up level, you know, sometimes different things come to the surface and your money story changes as you're an entrepreneur and as you start coaching. And sometimes when you're coaching, you hear similar things to what you need to hear and what your clients are experiencing. And there's all sorts of layers to this. But for you, was that a real turning point, just finishing the book and getting it to a point where you're like, wow, that chapter is closed now?
Yeah, so that's interesting. As I was, you know, finishing writing the book and I was doing coaching with my coach and even like I doing YouTube videos, starting to just like understand some of the things, I started to dive into narcissism and really start to like, okay, what is narcissism? And it's interesting that like I'm like, what is narcissism? And like my coach one day said to me, you were emotionally abused. And I was like, I was emotionally like all
Yeah.
I'm telling you, all of this stuff was like, I was emotionally abused. And so I started looking it up and just all the things that because I didn't have a proper like emotional experience, like I didn't have a parent like witness my emotions and help me process and understand, like those functions were shut down. And so it's created this opportunity for me to say like, oh, that's actually a thing that you like putting words to it. It's almost like a toddler, like you're helping them go through the experience so that they can, you know, put a name to it and all of that without like this feels good, this feels bad type of thing. And so that's a lot of what's come of it. But what's happened is it's helped me realize the toxicity that really exists between my relationship between my father, my sister, and my brother. And shortly before the book came out, I did a cutoff with them. I blocked them.
Right.
And so yeah, I mean, this whole thing has just been another layer of healing and another layer of awareness.
Yeah. And I was gonna use the word abuse because I was gonna ask around the time when you were finding that you were needing certain products at a certain age, and the word abuse nearly come out my mouth when I was thinking of a question around that. But I thought you didn't physically mention the word in the book, so I didn't want to use it as a trigger. So I was
Yeah,
really
that's
glad.
interesting you say that because because honestly, it wasn't until more towards the end of this experience, and then I've been working through it with my coach, that it's really occurred to me that like this was a level of abuse that was really I was experiencing.
Yeah.
I guess, like, it's one of those things, like, if you've never like drank a cherry Coke, you can't really articulate what a cherry Coke tastes like. So you don't actually know that you're missing the taste of a cherry Coke. So that's a lot of what I've experienced. And so that's really like kind of the after effect of the book, is like almost going back and saying, listen, I know that you don't see it in this light, but like really starting to open up the awareness of like, yes, these, like, almost putting a name to it.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that's the reason why people have these subconscious blocks so deep, but they don't know any different. You don't have two childhoods to trial out and go, oh, well, this one's great and that one isn't. We just have the one, and we form the only thing that we know. And you can't kind of compare if you don't know any different, or you maybe wouldn't label it. It was just your life.
Yeah, because I mean, like, I knew that was happening was like inappropriate. Like, I knew it wasn't okay. My stepmom singled me out, or like that she, just the things that were happening. Like, I knew it wasn't okay. Like, I knew my dad exploding and getting like pissed off about crazy things. Like, I knew that wasn't okay. But because I didn't necessarily see other families having that similar experience, but it wasn't to the effect of like, I was like, there's something really wrong here. Like, it didn't occur to me that this is like massively inappropriate, or like this is massively not okay. It's so interesting because you're so young too. You don't really know how to articulate, like, something's off. And I think that's where I really started to, when I look back on, like, for example, learning the word intuition. I mean, it was only like 6-7 years ago when I met Emily that I started hearing the word intuition. I was like, intuition? What is intuition? Like, that's interesting. That's some witchy stuff. And then like I start like thinking back to all these like little tiny nudges and these little things that like my inner voice was always there. And that's really what I go through part of it to really tell the reader and remind the reader that like, you have this voice inside of you. It's really just tapping into it, because it's been there all along. Like, it's been nudging you all along.
Yeah. And what was nice, and the things that you've touched on, is that, don't know where you're at thinking of the next book, but I feel like there's another 4 could come off the back of this, just with, like you said, talking about your grandma and so many things that could actually continue to help other people.
Yeah. So there is a next book. There is a
Exciting.
next book. I was thinking about signing the contract to go into it in July, but I'm thinking I'm gonna go into it in January, and I'm gonna go into it at the beginning of next year. And so it'll probably be another release about this time next year. So there's definitely a next book. The next thing, I am gonna go ahead and release a workbook that goes along with this book.
Oh, that would be so good.
Yeah.
I know we touched on the activities, but I think you could, to be fair, the activities are really comprehensive, but I know you've got so much more to teach. And obviously I've been exposed to that as well. So I think that would be perfect for people. And I'm excited to hear more when we see that.
Yeah. So I just started talking with the lady who helped me with the book, and we're gonna meet next week about it. So we're gonna try to do like a 90-day like re-release, and then I'll release the workbook that like it's like partnered with this book. I don't think it'll be like super different, but it'll probably be something that'll like highlight different things. It'll remind certain areas. Probably it'll be interesting too, because I'm coming at it from a new perspective from when I actually wrote the book.
Yeah. And one thing you touched on, which was when you took yourself back to that age where you were, I think what's really happened with that is it's took out any, you're not looking back and thinking, poor me, or you're not in victim mode or anything like that. You really just telling this raw story from the way that you perceived it and felt. And there's, even to the point where you kind of talk around, you don't know the reasons why that happened, but what you assumed or what you perceived was this. And it really is a way to just get that voice across in an adult way, but through that real, this is what I felt. And that was powerful.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for people to start to understand that like the quote unquote truth doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't really matter if my mom felt bad about leaving, or it doesn't really matter that like my dad, like it doesn't like none of that matters. What matters is that 2-year-old, that 3-year-old, that 4-year-old thought and perceived the situation this way and then created a story around it, which then created another story that protected the story from being heard again, and so on and so on. Like that's what matters.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily to relive it. And that's definitely, I can't say like I definitely went back and I relived it, but I experienced it from a new place. And I don't think you have to necessarily go back and relive it. I don't think that's the point. The point is to witness it from that place of like, okay, what did that 3-year-old, that 4-year-old, like, how did she witness it? What was she thinking about herself? And, at the end of the day, because I got, my husband, I would tell him all the time, like, I'm really nervous, this person, that person, all the things. And he's like, but this is your story. Remember this, like, he reminded me constantly, this is your story from your perspective. And that's really what it is. And that at the end of the day is what matters when you're really working on healing these layers.
Yeah. And all you can ever do is see your perception. You can try and emphasize and you can try and put yourself in other people's shoes, but it's the impact and you owning your own feelings, which I think that's where we all need to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And really just understanding that it's not good, it's not bad, like it really is neutral. And when you can come to that place of witnessing it without judging it and just witnessing it for what it is, then you can begin to start to heal it. You can't simultaneously judge something and try to heal it at the same time.
No.
It doesn't work that way.
No. And we were touching on some of the things that I'm venturing into now, and the timeline healing that we do in MSA is very much around that. When we go back, it's not about going in and feeling it and getting sucked into those emotions, because it's really about being, like you said, that observer and hovering over it and seeing what you took from it rather than what, because our memories are very subjective, aren't they? So we sometimes think, well, it happened this way, and it doesn't matter how it happened how you felt, which is where you're going to get the power from.
Yeah, exactly. That's so beautifully said.
Yeah. So now let's talk about you hitting the stage at TEDx. And can we say that Heather is now a TEDx speaker? Tell us about your talk.
I know, it's so surreal. It's so interesting. So it's supposed to be released. It was going to be released in July. Now, like TED is behind, and it's supposed to be released in August. But basically, the process, if anybody doesn't know, it's so the person that you work with, the facilitator, you submit a speech, and like that's the speech that you submit.
Yeah.
Like you can't make changes to it. It's not like one of these things you can go and like kind of free flow or whatever. It's like you submit a speech and it has to be based on a theme. So the theme that our whole thing was going first. So what was like a first that kind of happened or that you experienced or whatever. So we wrote it, and when you write your speech, the person, they'll listen back to your speech and they'll kind of go through it and see if you kind of went off on something else, because there's a lot of rules about self-promotion, political stuff, like all the things. And so they have to go through and basically kind of give it like a check mark, and then they do all the marketing stuff, this SEO and all of that. But that's why it's taking so long. But that's been interesting, because what I wrote about, so what the speech is about is I named it The Art of Quiet Quitting. And so what I talk about in the speech is like, I take you on this journey again, for when I was sitting in my office with my high heels and my fancy skirt, and I have all the 3 monitors, and it hits me, oh my God, I have like arrived at this like this pivotal point that, I went to college, I got the good job, I got the good salary, I got the car, I got the house, I got the husband, like I got all the things, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, I've been lied to. I was supposed to be happy right now.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be like floating in money. And I was supposed to like, the promises that I've been given for like, go to school, get a job, like all the things. And then you are going to magically be happy. And so I talk about like when that hits me, I start to realize like all the corporate toxicity that is around me. And I'm like, oh my God. And this is the reason why I'm so fucking miserable, and all these people are miserable, and like all the things. And I really kind of, I end it, or my ending is about realizing that my wealth is not tied to my career. And I redefine wealth. I've learned to redefine wealth as like, how do I spend my day? How do I feel? How do I feel doing like all these things? And then I really kind of end it by saying that created like me stopping climbing the corporate ladder and really partnering with people who have a passion for people and who have a passion for the world. And that's my new defining of wealth. And so I end it with prompting the audience to look at, how do you define wealth? Is it really a number in your bank account, or is it something that comes from within?
Yeah. And that's amazing. Like that realization of, what, I am meant to be happy now. What's going on? How many people just accept that that's what life is? And
And it's so,
dream?
and we're like, I think we're finally like, the world is waking up to that, because I mean, if you look chronologically, with the white collar, blue collar kind of industry, we've had all these things happen, with having World War I and World War II, and then, Vietnam, and like all the things have happened, and it's created this corporate structure and consumerism and capitalism, and all of these things have happened. And now I think we're finally kind of coming off of the fog of that, of all of these like generational things that have been passed down. And then now we're starting to look back and go, okay, that worked for that generation, and that's, and honestly, survival, right? I mean, so much, we were just trying to survive. I mean, think about like, I mean, I can't even imagine living through like a war, like literally like the whole things, the atrocities that happened in the 30s and 40s with all of that. Like, I cannot even imagine. Those people are our grandparents. Those people raised our parents who raised us. Like, if you can sit here and really look at that and go, wait a second, it's no wonder we've been living under this fog, because we've been living with such atrocities that it lives in their bodies, which is passed down, because we're living under such a survival place. And now we have such freedom, we have so much more money, we have so much accessibility that it's like, okay, we have to start to rewrite these stories.
Yeah, because whatever childhood you had, whether it was good, bad, indifferent, that the influence that you'll have received from those grandparents, and that then affecting your parents and then now yourself, it isn't that far removed. And you think of, I think back to, I was researching obviously things for women with abundance and looking at, my mum wouldn't have been able to open a bank account without a husband or a father there. And just things like
Or
that.
their son.
Yeah.
Or their son. I recently looked that up too. It wasn't until 1984 in the United States. I don't know what it is overseas, but in the United States, 1984, that women could open a bank account, get a mortgage in their own name, and have a bank account and have a business credit card or any type of lending. Can you imagine having your 15-year-old son having to sign your mortgage because he has a penis?
Yeah.
Like, seriously.
Yeah. But
that's the reality. That was just that. I was born in 1981.
Yeah. And that was when it changed for us. And even when you look at now, so I was having a conversation with my cousin, and because she isn't married to her partner that she has 2 kids with, if, for instance, she wants to take her kids on holiday, she has to have a written letter from her husband. Like, he's not her husband, her boyfriend. And I understand it's things in place for abduction and things, but we're in 2024, and just because a woman isn't married, it's like she doesn't have a legal right to the child she gave birth to be able to take them on holiday. Things like that is just mind-blowing. That are still in existence now from all of those traditions and things that, the church has brought in. And then I know through your book, you talk about the church a lot and the influence it had on the things your dad was saying to you. And we can't hide away from this. Like, we need to start breaking this now for future generations, because it's not like we have all this freedom, because we've still got these money blocks or subconscious things going on from all of that. And if we don't address it in ourselves, we're just continuing to put that on the next generation without even realizing.
Yeah, exactly. And, also when you want to think about the idea of like, why do I still struggle with this? Or why does this, when you think about your money, you're like, why, like the whole thing. That's why. It's like, really think generationally and have that perspective of, and this is why. And so then take yourself out of that judgment zone of, why am I still having this? Well, you have this because it's so actively living in our culture today. I mean, even though, yes, we don't have to have a man on our mortgage anymore or whatever, but people that experience that and lived through that are very much still in practice. A lot of people, it's still the generation in the workplace. It's still their thing. Like, that didn't leave just because we're in 2024. The mindset and the energy and all the things that are still very much active in the generation that grew up in that type of survival is still very active in a lot of people today that, run the leadership in our corporate, that run the leadership in our government, that, make decisions for the world. That's still very much active in the energies in the world. So when you think about, okay, why do I struggle so much to open my bank account? Because the energy is still very much active. And so if you can take it from a place of judging to that non-judgment place and really observe and say, okay, why is this happening? how did I perceive it? Like what's coming up for me, and really come back to that place of being your own observer.
Yeah, I love that. And that is something that so many people just, I think we've been absorbed by doing the money work for so long that you forget that people don't necessarily make that connection and connect those dots back to where did that come from? What have I heard? What influences did I have? And even if you didn't really believe it or you thought that's not going to happen to me, it's kind of soaked in to that subconscious without you realizing, and you find out you're playing out a similar pattern. Might not look the same, but it's the same pattern as
Yeah, because the energy is still very much active, and it's for us to really wake up. And again, I think we're finally, like, the world is starting to wake up to, this isn't working anymore. This doesn't feel good. I don't like this, and I get to choose. I get to choose.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a new dynamic that we're just now starting to put back into our vocabulary, or probably for millennia, is that especially as women, we get to choose, where it's been inbred in us and very much ingrained in us because of our survival, that we didn't have a choice. We literally didn't have a choice. Our great grandparents and great grandma, like, they didn't have so much of a choice because of their survival. They were doing it to survive. And thank God they did, because we're here.
Exactly. And that's the point. Like, you don't look back and look at that blame, or it's a fact. It's what happened to you and the things that you're healing from. And now it's a case of, what do I do with that? Or what do I release from that, rather than it being looking back with resentment or anything. It's how do you move on from that and change it going forward, which I think is what you get across powerfully in Finally Worthy.
Yeah, exactly. And it really is about I really think it does have a lot to do with witnessing yourself. And I think just like releasing it and just saying, like, okay, and choosing, that it's like, no, I'm not going to subscribe to that belief anymore. I'm done with this. And constantly going back to, okay, hold on a second. Cause again, like, your subconscious comes up and it's like, oh, wait a minute, remember this, remember that. And then bringing it back to say, no, we talked about this.
Yeah.
We don't subscribe to that anymore, because we are safe, we're thriving, like all the things, because, your subconscious is like, but remember when you like almost died and got ate by the saber-toothed tiger?
And I love how you've just put that. I was just having that conversation this week. A belief is just a thought that you keep having, and then it impacts your actions, rather than sometimes, and especially in the work that we do, once people start to understand healing or the different techniques, and they're like, this belief is so deep rooted and it's so deep that, I've just not got it. And kind of the feed that blocks by making out that the belief is so deep that they're just never going to reach it. And actually, it's a choice to say no and believe, say no, we're not carrying that forward. We're not believing that. Yeah, we'll have a conversation every time you want to bring it up, but we're not choosing that path anymore. We're not believing that. And that's the difference, isn't it? It is just choosing that new thought until that new thought becomes your belief.
Yeah, it really is. And it really is coming back to where helping your body feel safe again. Cause I think that's a lot of what it is too. And I know, like, this year I've done a lot of like inner child healing and a lot of talking to that inner child, which is essentially like your subconscious, but really having those conversations with, like, okay, like, remembering, like, we're safe and like nothing's going to happen, like really having those conversations, and then really helping that part feel safe and like, okay, now we can proceed.
Yeah. And that is powerful, isn't it? We do have to go in and kind of reparent ourselves. And we were just talking before, the work around the archetypes. There's all these different parts, but the inner child is probably the most prominent one that you're going to have to keep going back and re-healing, and starting with that is really going to be a game changer for people.
Yeah. I do a lot with inner child, and just, and I think too, like, even so, a lot of it's been like just accepting her, like when she comes up and she's like really, like, I've noticed, for example, like if I'll get really like agitated or like something's going on, it's really just that like inner child part of me is like, we want to go play, like we want to go do something fun or whatever it is, right? And instead of judging this, like going out and skipping through the yard or doing, hula hoop or whatever, instead of judging that and like, oh, that's just what little kids do, accepting that and going, okay, let's go outside and play, like really embracing that, that's really created this new level of awareness and healing, honestly.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it, isn't it? There's the two sides. So I recorded my podcast a couple of weeks ago around bringing that creativity and that playfulness. And once you start to bring that into your business, everything takes off. So it's not just about, healing and all the deep rooted things. It's about allowing yourself to kind of bring that energy back to your life. Because who said being an adult had to be so boring?
Right?
And ultimately, for me, bringing my inner child into the creative energy of my business has allowed it to take off, because it's so much more fun and vibrant. And I don't do things that I think I should do. I do things that just light me up. And that's where the energy and the magnetism comes from. So it's actually healthier for me in my business to bring my inner child to work.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting too, because that's almost like what's coming up for me is like, and how does that, like, and this is how this has to do with your money. I mean, again,
Yeah.
like, when you're kind of rejecting that inner child, or you're rejecting that fun and that play and that creativity, like, okay, that's affecting your money because you're not able to authentically show up. You're not able to do all these things. And that's where like I'm always going back to like, okay, and this is affecting my money here. This is affecting my money here. Like we always think that it's like, it doesn't matter because, this is the business and this is the home, or this is the business and and it's like, no, it all centrals back to, your money. And essentially, like, how do you do wonderful things in the world? By having more money.
Yeah.
I mean, that money is what helps you do more beautiful things in the world.
Yeah. And it's just around who you're being and allowing money to be a resource working for you rather than something that you hold all this emotional baggage towards. So money's meant to be here to support that fun and playful energy that you want to bring to the world, rather than it being something you have to do a result and then get rewarded for.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that I've really learned, I'm learning to really embrace more of, is that like all of this really is coming back to my own healing. It's like even thinking about like helping people with coaching or helping people with money or whatever, like that gives me a certain reward, or that gives me a certain like inner excitement, or all the things. And I've really kind of started to redefine quote unquote money, or how I make money, or like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And I'm really coming back to the fact of, this is for my evolution, for like my soul's evolution in this life. It's like, why did I write the book? Well, to help people, but then simultaneously it created this beautiful healing journey of my own. So, it's like really, like, I know your audience is a lot of business women, and when you think about your business, like coming back home to like, why am I doing this? Like, what part of doing photography or art or coaching, what part of this is fulfilling my soul's journey? Like, how how is this helping me show up every day to be the best person that I'm come here to do? Like, how is this like helping that cycle? And how is this fulfilling my cup today?
Yeah.
Instead of like, I got to make money and I got to do this and I got to do this for everybody else. It's like, no, how is this ultimately helping you internally?
Yeah. And that's ultimately, that is, I know we talked about this in my own journey and the pivot I made to, it didn't matter which way the money showed up, or it didn't matter which format the business was in, or whether I had corporate clients or what. None of that mattered as long as I was doing what I knew what I was here to do, which was develop people to have that impact in whatever way they wanted to do. So whether that was, like I said, photography, or it was building that kind of empire, but within whatever that empire looks like for them, it's that impact for them. So as long as I'm showing up every day doing that, the mechanics or the structure doesn't matter. And it allows you to kind of let go of, well, it's got to be the business, or it's got to be this contract, or this way, or it's got to be a book, or all of that. It can just be it all. And whatever feels good at that point.
Yeah. And so I know you said you're a manifesting generator. And I think, and especially I'm a generator. And so really looking at, like that's actually your normal cycle, especially as a manifesting generator. It's actually you're in alignment with having all these things, because and I know like years ago when I was starting to learn human design, it's especially like, and also for manifestors, it's almost like that's your route. It's like you take it to a certain point, and then it's not necessarily your journey to see it to completion.
No.
Which is the purpose for having your projectors and your generators and all the things. And so if you really bring this down to a business level, it's really getting in alignment with what does actually feel good for you. And does it feel good for me to like do this beginning part, or does this beginning part feel kind of like more? So then you like to do the maybe middle part or the end part or whatever. And then it's like, okay, great. So let's find somebody that can help me get it started, or let's find a process that helps me get it started. So like for mine, being a generator, I know a lot of generators have started to use AI. Like they can't think of something, so they go to AI and they ask AI a question, and then AI starts to like create like a process. And then it's like, okay, now my generator can respond to this. So I think it's a lot of that too. It's really getting, again, coming from that place of non-judgment, of saying like, oh, I actually really like this, and how can I fill in the gaps for this other stuff? And so that's where it does come back to the story that you think like, oh, I need to be super mom, and I need to be Wonder Woman, and I need to do all the things myself. And I don't have enough money to get help. I don't have enough time to blah, blah, blah. And then that's where the story comes in about, okay, well, when did I decide that this story of I don't have enough time, this story of I don't have enough money, like, then that's like where that pieces of the layer starts to come out. And so it's so interesting. Like I do it so naturally now. And I realize that's not normal for everybody, but really when you start to notice these tightening, especially in your body, it's like, start to just notice like, okay, why am I feeling this way? And start to kind of pull apart the pieces.
Yeah. And just like you said, going back to what you've wrote on the back of your book, being that money detective. And it's just that body, that emotion detective. And I talk in energy, you're talking more in your body, but it's still that physical reaction of you feel that restriction in somewhere. And when that hits, it's not just to power through or to, continue or go, oh, it'll be all right. It's like, no, your body, your energy, whatever it is for you, is constricting, and that's telling you something. And it's just your purpose to go, why? What's be curious and explore.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when I was one of the coaches, I would ask her, I was like, okay, so how do I know when I need to stop working? Like it's like I think back, it's like, well, duh, but it was so funny. She's like, well, when you start to feel kind of tense in your body, then that's when like you kind of probably need to wind it up for the day. And I found myself giving that same advice to my son. He's 22 now.
Yeah.
He's been working on studying. He sent me a message about studying. And I was like, and so when you, because he's very intuitive. So when you start to feel constricted in your body, that's when you need to like, probably get up and move around and do jumping jacks, blah, blah, blah. But it's just so interesting that like the simplest things are really the answer a lot of times. Like we think it's this giant, like 10-step process. It's really not. It's just like tune in.
I think it's like you say though, that intuition and that, feeling isn't strong initially. So it gets stronger.
Because we've learned to shut it down.
Yeah.
Because of survival, right? Because that voice that's saying like, hey, there's something off here. There's something not right. Like something's going on. That actually threatens our survival when we're very young. So like, if we're really young and you start asking your parents or you start like, whatever in your environment, you start to kind of question these things. In a lot of ways, it's your survival because, your parents get mad, you get, there was spankings or whatever was happening back in the day. It threatened your survival.
Yeah.
And so we learn to turn it off. And so now our job is to learn how to listen to it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like you said, we've been doing this for a while. So sometimes we probably talk as if like, well, you listen to your intuition or you listen to your body or your feelings are your guide. And it's, for anybody listening who this is new to, it is just listening to those feelings and whatever comes up for you that, feeling tense, getting headaches, feeling, your shoulders sore, you can't straighten up, you have that energy in your chest. None of that is normal. And it's letting you know that that's become a normal, but it's not a normal state of being.
Right.
You should be feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I really believe that we came here to enjoy life. We came to this life, to this body, to this time so that we could have a breakthrough, but that we could also still enjoy our life. We could still be happy. Some people, maybe that's not their journey, but I believe, at least for the people who listen to me and who understand what I'm saying, that you're here to feel happy, feel fulfilled, have a certain level of awareness. And, one thing that I teach a lot of people is to pause through the day, like literally. And some of my clients, I have to have them set an alarm on their phone where they are intentionally pausing and they like notice. Like I teach them, okay, so like you said, you just notice, you pause, because the problem is we push through our day. We're just like everything. And then all of a sudden we're like, what happened? Like, you drove like 10 miles to get somewhere and you're like, I don't even remember leaving the house.
Yeah.
Because we go unconscious so much.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do is we have to come back in to notice what's happening. And so that's where it's like, I have people pause through their day a lot.
Yeah.
For me, I'm really aware of it and you're also really aware of it. But if you're new to this work, the big part of like, okay, well, how do I start listening to my intuition? Well, the big part of it is that you want to really start to take intentional pauses through the day. And I teach people to do a 90-second breathing. And it's interesting because when my coach told me to do this 90-second breathing and set these alarms, I was like, I don't have time for that. Like, I don't have time to stop in the middle of my day. Like, who has time for that? But it's so interesting. It's like, well, if you don't have time to stop and pause for 90 seconds and become aware of what's happening, then that's where like that deeper level of awareness needs to take place, because there's something else. You're missing the point.
Yeah. And the people who don't have time for that are the people who definitely need that for sure. So if anybody's listening, like, yeah, I don't have time, you need it. Please stop.
Yeah, there's a deeper story there. Like, what's the story that's feeding I don't have time?
Exactly.
And why do you feel like you don't have time? And it's like, no, really what I quote unquote didn't have time for was exploring why I thought I didn't have time.
Yeah. And I'm conscious of the time now, and we're getting to that time, Heather. So,
okay.
I mean, I could literally talk for hours on this, and I love talking to you anyway. So it's joy for me. But do you want to tell everybody about your new program that you're doing a launch in July? And I'm sure this will.
Yeah. I'm going to be starting a launch in July, and it's honestly, so it's going to be 7 weeks. It's taking everybody back to the basics, but with money. So really going back to this place of, like breathing in money, having these pauses, really going back and looking at your money. I'm actually going to have some activities around looking at your money.
Yeah.
Like really helping people, like when they become activated, feeling tight in their body, whatever it is, what's going on. So it's really kind of coming back to the basics, but specifically with money. And so it's for people who, like you have had a certain level of success and you've started to do all the, it's like, oh, I've done all the things, but I still feel stuck, or money just continues to feel like this elusive thing that you can't figure out. That's really what the process that I'm taking everybody through is like, okay, like, let's figure out why you continue to feel so stuck and just money is just so elusive to you. Like, I've manifested all the things except for money, right? Like, that's what this program is for. It's like, okay, let's come back to that and what's going on there and really start to, what I call, pull the thread of why you still feel like money is just so hard.
I can't wait for that. And I will share all the details of that with everybody as well. So that'll all be in the show notes, and there'll be loads of ways to contact Heather. But please follow her on all of the socials and get your copy of Finally Worthy, which is out now on Amazon. So I will post all the links to that as well, Heather. But anything final you want to add, or any wise thoughts you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, so the website is heatherdoran.biz, and then for the book it's just /finally worthy. That does take you directly to Amazon for the book, and I'm just really excited. I mean, the book is still pretty, I kept the book pretty low priced because I really just want to help people have an aha and awareness around what's been happening in your mind and in your life, because I really do believe that we can create change, but it will happen this one person at a time, which it's you are the one person, and then you can create this beautiful ripple effect as you change. All the people around you really create this ripple effect of change. And so that's really what my hope is. So yes, thank you so much. I receive all of this. I put makeup on today and I don't do it a lot. I was really tearing up. I really receive this, your comments and just having me on this just been amazing. Thank you.
Well, I've always, just loved you anyway, Heather, but the book, and I could not put it down, literally. It was just brilliant. So hats off to you. hats off for your first book being an absolute page turner. And I can't wait to see your next one and the workbook and everything. So just thank you for coming on and spending your time with me talking today, because it's been brilliant.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, I'll catch everybody on next week's episode, but I will make sure that you have all the links to contact Heather. Thank you so much.
Thank you.